The sound of the MLB Baseball Scout Podcast, and I'm Mick Gillispie with the man himself, Mr. Tim Wilken, the former Cubs and other team scouting director, special assistant to the GM, a guy that has spent his life in the world of scouting, and we appreciate all of you guys for hanging out with us. A lot to talk about. This is like this Christmas of scouting with the MLB Draft taking place, so make sure that you follow us at Cubs Baseball Channel. Got some other shows that are going to probably debut already by the time you look at this. So really a lot of cool stuff going on, and we're going to talk about some of it. But first, Tim, how you been, man?
Super. It's been pretty darn warm down here. Been to a few Florida State League and Gulf Coast League games and watched some of that action, and just had a couple birthdays here around the house. Not mine, but thank heavens. And it's been going well. How about yourself?
Yeah, look, when you get old like we are, you don't like birthdays. Like, they come and people are like, hey, it's your birthday. You're like, nah. You know, when you're a kid, you're like, they can't get here fast enough, you know? Like, I get presents. They probably give you presents and cake just because it's a way of reversing the psychology of getting old, right?
No doubt. We've had a few cakes around here the last few days, so I'm well versed in different kinds of cakes, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the MLB Draft. It's taking place right now. You know what? It used to be kind of, middle of June type thing, beginning of June. You know, you didn't really watch it. It was hard to find, and, somebody would get drafted, and it would be like a text from, like, a friend that saw it on the bottom of the ESPN ticker. And now it's turned into a big event. Like, I think MLB's done a nice job of, they put it during the All-Star break festivities, or really, obviously the Sunday of the All-Star break, but there's no games. And it's at the site where the games are taking place, and there's a big stage, and I like it. I mean, I think they needed it. It feels like a bigger event than it used to.
Without a doubt, and I mean, it's a month later, a little tougher on the scouts, and I'm not sure if any thought process or preparation included that. And it's another month for those guys who have been on the road since mid to latter January. So I do like the festivities. I like the format. And I think it does bring some excitement into the game. But at the same time, your scouts are out there beating the roads up. And it's been a long time for them. So hopefully that month doesn't take it out of them, and they get some time off after the draft. So,
right, yeah. And so, what does that mean, having an extra month? I know that it gets you through the the college baseball playoffs and the World Series, because it used to be before that. Do you think it gives you maybe a little bit more evaluation time on character, just because there probably aren't games that these guys are playing unless they're in summer leagues?
Most definitely. Not only conversing with these players and getting to know them better. Also, it's you can see some of these guys that were injured in college that have rehabbed and are pitching in the Cape or playing in the Cape.
Right.
And you can get the last second looks at these players as well. So it's I think it's good for all people. Like I said, it's a little tougher on the scouts because that's another month, and sometimes you can overthink on some situations draft wise and overplay it because you've seen them so much and you're dissecting, and I kind of think you can overdo it as well, but it does help supplementally with those summer leagues, some of the showcases later on, and naturally the draft combine.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and the summer leagues are like a month in now. So
yeah,
you can get a feel for what a player looks like with a wood bat, right? Or
correct.
pitching against a wood bat. But I mean, I would think scouting wise that the biggest, toughest part of drafting guys that are hitting with aluminum bats is how they'll transition to hit with a wood bat. And does their
No
swing work with that?
No doubt. No doubt. And the thing that in the past, and this has kind of changed, and you can see, just for instance, the Cape League, they've got a lot more juniors going to this league trying to play up. So some of those guys that might be anywhere from third to 10th round, maybe they can play up into the draft by going to the Cape. You get to see them before the draft with the wood bats, and I think that's pretty helpful.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that being tough, and I guess having the extra time, as far as, just the fact that we're a month later now, which I don't think that's why MLB did it. But I think that's ultimately what helps the scouts is you get a little extra time to see someone, because I can imagine that there's been a lot of swings and misses with guys trying to figure out how to hit with a wood bat compared to an aluminum bat. And, so you get the extra month. But I'm sure it's taxing, like you're saying. What about the event itself? Do you like the event itself that MLB has now?
You're saying in reference to the combine?
The cameras and like, hey, we're going to go up. Here's the commissioner. Next pick is Baltimore. Next pick is the Cubs. Next pick it's in Seattle. Everybody goes nuts. It's part of, you got the futures game on Saturday. You got the draft on Sunday. Monday's the home run derby. Tuesday's the All-Star game. So I'm talking about just like the fact that they have packaged this into an event that's made for TV. And when you look at the NFL draft, Tim, it's a bigger event than most other sports' Super Bowl.
No doubt. I think also, and going back to what we were talking about just a little bit earlier, I don't know if you get to see the player Arjun Namala, a shortstop that the Blue Jays took, 20th pick yesterday, and I was just taken back how well he handled interviews prior to the draft, and then how he handled himself after he was drafted. And I'm thinking Toronto might have hit a home run there with that player. I'll get back to it'll be in my scouting tip for the end of the day, but it was good to see all these interviews with Arjun Namala, and very very engaging, very calm, and I just it looks like he's got poise beyond the norm. So.
Yeah, well, I saw the interview that they did with him, and crazy, his family's from India, and they play cricket in India, and, it kind of puts you in a spot where you think, you know what, maybe someone like him comes over, becomes a star, and who knows if he'll even get to the big leagues, but it could attract a lot of different, fans to the game, right? I mean, think about it.
Sure. Not only from India or other places around the world, and if this guy can have some decent success on his way up the ladder to the major leagues, and then hopefully has a decent career, this might spur on all kinds of people. So,
are you near? Is Dunedin near Strawberry Crest, Florida?
No, it's next to Plant City.
Okay.
And it's on the east side of Tampa in Hillsborough County there. And he's, this school's relatively young. I want to say it's about a 10-year-old school, maybe 20. But Kenny Rogers, left-handed pitcher for Texas Rangers. He was from Plant City, so that's hopefully this guy becomes another big leaguer from Plant City.
One other topic before we kind of get into some other stuff here about the draft is Paul Skeens. We knew he was going to be number one. He was the ace of the LSU Tigers, but he's a guy that transferred in, right? Didn't he transfer in from Air Force?
Air Force.
And then the number 2 pick, his teammate, Dylan Cruz. I'm concerned about college baseball and the fact that there's only a few teams with money, LSU being one of them. Like, I get it. They had 3 first-round picks, but guys are going to be getting paid to come to school there. It doesn't feel like amateur athletics to me. I'm curious to see how NIL affects just the parity in college baseball, and this having the number 1 and the number 2 pick coming from LSU, when I know the money that they're throwing out at these guys, is concerning to me for the college game.
No doubt. I'm not really in tune to what is exactly going on. What is NIL money?
Yeah, name, image, and likeness. And what they do is, they'll just basically pay you to come to school there. What it used to be is that you'd have a star player. When I was at University of Maryland, Joe Smith was like the star center. They'd sell his number 32 in the Terrapin team store, and then he didn't get any of the money. And it's like, well, wait a second here. He can't sign an autograph. He can't make money on his name, image, and likeness. But what it's turned into is, hey, why don't you come here and we'll pay you? And I just feel like it was concerning to me to see 3 number 1s come from one baseball program, because that's a ton of talent. And I just don't remember years where it's been like that. Now, LSU won the World Series this year in college baseball. They have some great players. I'm just concerned with the overall health of college baseball. I guess in the world of scouting, to you guys, it probably makes it easier because you'll have a lot of good players on one team.
No doubt. And they're going to have some high picks there next year at LSU, featuring Tommy White and others. But, the SEC, I'm sure, will be in the front of this. And, just because of the quality of the conference. And it is concerning to some degree. So.
Well, Tim's taken place, been part of a lot of different MLB drafts. And, guys, this is show 7 of the MLB Baseball Scout Podcast. Tim and I get together, try to do it each week, and talk about different things going on in the world of scouting. But please like and subscribe. You're slowly filling up our YouTube channel. Please keep it going, man. We're going to start adding some other shows, the NL Central shows, some different Cubs shows on there. It's a Cubs-centric station. So at Cubs Baseball channel, part of that is having the former Cubs scouting director, Tim Wilken, on and talking scouting with him. And we'll even have his scouting tip of the day for all you scout wannabes, or maybe the people that have been in the business for a long time and are always looking for a tip. But all right, let's talk new rookies for 2023 in MLB. And you did a position breakdown of these guys. One of the players I got to ask you about is the guy that is leading the way for the MVP voting. What is that, Corbin Carroll out at Arizona? You used to work there for the Diamondbacks. This guy's taking baseball by storm.
No doubt. I got to see him in high school in the state of Washington that year. He was drafted. For a shorter or smaller type player, there's not a huge effort in his game, which makes it much easier for him, I'm sure. Very good baseball player. I don't think center field's a slam dunk in long range of things, but he's had a couple things here with his shoulder lately on some swings, so that's a little concerning, and I'm sure they're addressing that. But he's definitely got a chance to be Rookie of the Year, it looks like, and he might garner some MVP votes.
How involved were you with him? That was when you worked there, right? When you guys would have been bringing him up?
Correct. I'm trying to think what year he was. I want to say 2017 or 18. What do you got?
Oh,
Just
let's
hit that.
pull. Yeah,
Hit
let's
that
pull.
red thing.
Yeah, it's right there on the screen.
It doesn't. Go ahead and hit the right there. Back up. See
How
where
about
it's.
this? How
Yeah.
about that right
Yeah.
there? There you go.
There.
2020 he was born. Or excuse me, 2000 he was born. First round pick, 2019.
Yeah. And I got to see him that year, and very engaging player. Plays so well under control, and like I said, there's not a lot of effort to his game. So he's lived up to the expectancies to some degree here, and it should be interesting to watch him. And hopefully, the shoulder doesn't become a problem for him.
Yeah, he's had a great year, and look, if he can stay healthy, he had shoulder surgery in 2021 on his labrum, and you know what? The guy's got a chance not only to win Rookie of the Year with Ellie De La Cruz coming out of nowhere, still with a sizable lead according to Vegas. He could also win MVP depending on how the season ends. I mean, the fact that the Diamondbacks are at the top in the NL West is crazy to think about because they were so bad, but they've done it with, you know, some free agent signings, but a lot of homegrown talent like him.
Oh, no doubt. And you mentioned Ellie De La Cruz, and that was something else to watch the other night where he stole 3 bases and 2 pitches.
Yeah, yeah.
And he, I think only 7 guys have done it since 1969, and 7 players. And I think the pitcher fell asleep a little bit. He turned his back on him, and he took advantage of the situation, and that's instinct and not making the play finish. He kept it going, and it was exciting to watch.
Yeah, he is. So talk about these rookies that we've seen break through this year already through the first, the first half of the season, and your kind of your thoughts on those guys.
Well, there's 156 rookies that have entered Major League Baseball this year, and I think it's a byproduct naturally with the 26-man roster, and then when there's double headers, you can bring other guys up from AAA or AA. And I think that's part of the byproduct. There's so many rookies this year, and especially on the pitching side, I think there were 75 right-handers and 25 left-handers that have been brought up to the major leagues. And it's much easier for a ball player to crack the major leagues, and not necessarily that they're going to stay there, but you know, there's some clubs that have brought up as many as 10, 12 big leaguers or guys to the big leagues this year. And there's just been a lot more injection of young talent coming into the major leagues. Not necessarily all those guys are going to be frontline guys, but
no, I get what you're saying. I mean, look at the teams that are competing right now that were bottom feeders a couple of years ago, right? Texas, Baltimore. I can't throw Tampa Bay in there because they've been doing this for a while, where they've been winning. I mean, look, they got to the World Series a few years ago, so I'm not saying them, but the Diamondbacks were teams have gone, they've lost, they brought up talent, and now all of a sudden they're winning.
No doubt, and it's probably comes from shrewd acquisitions as well, like Walker, the first baseman there at Arizona, and everything's kind of come together in a short stint. And you mentioned Tampa Bay earlier, and they've been doing this for about 15 to 18 years.
Right.
It's not a huge surprise. So.
No, and what I wondered, Tim, is, I felt like when the Cubs during the offseason signed some of these guys, the Eric Hosmers and, Miles Masterboni, was another guy they brought in that wasn't part of their farm system. Trey Mancini, even Dansby Swanson, and Cody Bellinger, which I think actually Bellinger is of the guys that they signed was probably the one that I felt most comfortable with, because if you can trade him, I figured he had the potential of being a former MVP, of having a big year, right? But to go out there and sign these guys instead of promoting your prospects and letting them grind it out with a team that I didn't think had a chance to win, and they're not winning. They're in fourth place, or third or fourth, way back 8 games. I just felt like that was the wrong philosophy. Now, if you go out and trade those guys and you get more young players, could be right, but that playing time to me is so valuable.
No doubt, and it's a major market, and there might have been some pressure for them to turn things around, and they thinking that these guys that they signed in the off season would be a big help, and so far they're scuffling, but we'll see what happens the second half. So.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, but the trade deadline, and we'll have to do a show on that, is going to be really interesting because, I think the Cubs could trade Marcus Stroman. I think they could trade Cody Bellinger. I think they could trade Ian Happ. I mean, I think there's a host of guys that could get dealt if this team isn't competing by then, and I don't see that happening. So, all right, so draft geography is something else that you were kind of getting into with me. Unless you have something else that you want to add about the position breakdown of these rookies, because it's really interesting through 2 rounds what we're looking at as far as the geography. But first, anything else on, kind of the guys that have made their big league debut this year?
No, just the positional part, and I always look at the middle of the diamond, the second baseman, shortstop, center fielders, and catchers.
The core of the team is built up the middle.
Correct. Most clubs, that's their philosophy, and you have 14 second basemen, 8 shortstops, 5 catchers, and roughly 10 center fielders. So, I mean, you're talking close to 30 or a little bit over 30 guys that played up the middle, and it's you're starting to see it more and more, and I think this is a byproduct of it.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, well, look, geography, right? Geography in scouting, you know, and everyone knows that it's always been California, Texas, and Florida as the 3 states that produce the most baseball players in the draft, and partly it's size. They're all 3 the bigger states in our country, but also geography based on the weather. Like when I lived in Florida as a kid for a year, you could play baseball all the time. It was great. When I moved back to Baltimore, winter, it's too cold to play baseball, so you have a small window of when you're able to play. Those things seem to kind of factor into this. But your thoughts on, first off, the this year's draft through 2 rounds and what you're seeing as far as the trend goes of geography of players.
And I'm sure it's going to change some here with the next 18 rounds, 8 today, and then rounds 11 to 20. But we mentioned earlier when we were talking about regionals, 15 of the regionals were on this side of the country, or the east part of the country, and there was 1 regional at Stanford. And it seems like something is going on in California. California, through the draft since 1965, the first year of the draft, has always led the country in players selected. And so far this year, out of the 70 picks yesterday, Florida had 12 players, California had 4, and Texas, it must be a little bit of a down year. In Texas, they had 2. California's got 17 million more people than the state of Florida, and I'd say half of the 22 million people in Florida are over 60 years old. So, I mean, the pool's now down to 11 million. But
right.
So it's it's a little bit eye-opening. I also broke it up into sections of the country. Naturally, the Southeast was the leader. They had 27 players selected. And part of the country that's had a little bit of a resurgence is the central part of the country. They've had 21 players. The Northeast, it's been a pretty good year up there, and they've had 12. And we go out to the West, who always led every year. They have 9. So, I mean, they're being tripled by the Southeast, and there's been a change of guard as far as where the players are coming from, and I think it's pretty darn noteworthy to see what is happening as far as the geographics go.
I wonder why that is. Do you think that athletes in California are into soccer more over football or over baseball, maybe football mixed in there as well over baseball? I feel like, and we've talked about this before, that baseball's biggest problem is it's become a rich man's game, so you have to have money to get equipment, a ball and bat, glove, all the good teams travel, right? So that means that you're going to need money for hotels and uniforms and everything else. It's not like it used to be for me, Tim, where I would be on the bus on the ride home from school, and I would just start divvying up who was playing for what team, and we'd have a stickball game or some wiffle ball or something like that. It's not like that anymore. We played little league, we played t-ball and all that stuff, but now it's like you're on travel teams from the time you're 7 years old, and if you don't have money and support, you might as well get a soccer ball or a football.
No doubt, and maybe, I don't know what the numbers are as far as the other sports, but seemingly baseball's been on the downswing out in the West, and I think that needs to be looked into, given all the population. I mean, you have those 4 states that are probably the most productive in the West: Arizona, Washington, Oregon, and naturally California. But all of a sudden, it has changed quite a bit, and I'm sure the numbers will be different coming into these next 2 days of the draft, because California's got more colleges that play baseball than probably anywhere in the country. So I'm sure there's going to be some drafts coming up here, and those numbers might change around a little bit, but it's not going to be as dominant as they had been, since 1965. So it's a little bit of a changing of the guard, so to say.
Do you think that means that is that trouble for the game itself, or do you kind of just feel like it's just that the player pool in this country is coming from different spots, which, it's an international game, and baseball gets a lot of players from the Caribbean. There's players coming from Canada now. There's some players coming from Mexico. Even Australia will send a player or two. There's some Italian guys that play, not a lot, but some. Or what? I mean, how do you look at this and say, hey, this is bad for the game or good for the game, or does it even matter?
Well, I think it does matter, because if you got this kind of decline going on, there need to be some baseball people to look at this and say, hey, what can we do, especially Major League Baseball, in injecting some more hope, or trying to get these guys into playing baseball. And it's a little concerning, or maybe it's just one of those years, but it's been showing up the last 10 years in the draft. I mean, it's been very close the last 10 years between California and Florida, the amount of players being taken, and Florida has been kind of closing that gap steadily the last 10 years. And Texas has always been productive, and naturally Georgia and some other states. But I think it's concerning, and it just like I said, we've talked about it in other shows that the minority baseball, we've got to make even a bigger push, and hopefully someone comes up with an idea or has some answers to what route you're going to take to try to entice these young kids to play baseball.
Yeah, no, I know. We've kind of gotten into that before. Just the health of the game, it's not even the politics that go with that. It's just you want the best athletes playing baseball, not the richest athletes. Not the best families, like, every family, playing the game, America's pastime. The good thing, though, as far as the game in general, the TV ratings are up at the major league level. The games are faster with the pitch clock, and it feels like there is some momentum with people watching the game and enjoying the game but I think mainly because of the pitch clock, just because it's a lot faster.
No doubt. And I think it's been good for almost everyone. And I think concentration-wise during the course of a game, and you're playing 162 games, so people can lose concentration. But I think due to the shortening of these games, that it's been certainly fun to watch. You're done in 2.5 hours for the most part, and that's not been heard of for quite some time.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, just take it from someone that broadcasts baseball for a living, It's nice getting out of there at a decent hour. Hanging out with Tim Wilken. This is the MLB Baseball Scout Podcast. Guys, please follow us on our YouTube channel at Cubs Baseball Channel. And you can find our show there if you just want the audio. Anywhere you get podcasts, including Spotify, has the show. So we appreciate all of you guys that are a part of it. And as we grow, we want you to grow with us. So thank you. Thank you for being a part of this. And you know what? We're going to keep on talking about the issues of scouting. Take us through what it's like to be a scouting director at the draft. And you don't have to give us specifics, but maybe tell us, what it's like dealing with owners, what it's like dealing with team GMs, what your board looks like, just the entire experience. What's going on behind the scenes as these teams are drafting the future of their franchise?
Well, it's changed quite a bit in the and in the past, we would normally bring in our national cross-checkers who saw most of the higher-ranked players in the country, our regional guys who we would have anywhere from 3 to 5 of those scouts, and then once in a while we'd bring in a couple area guys, and we would have about 8 boards up, and the first one naturally would be probably your top 150 players. We would have them ranked, and then you have some of the other boards. And at that time, we had the board called the signability board, and that board could get quite heavy because mostly it's high school players that aren't or that might not be ready for professional baseball. And a lot of those players ended up on that board, or it could have been medical. And uh, I can give you an instance. We used to have our drafts when I was with the Cubs down in Mesa at the complex. And it was the first year that Tom Ricketts was with the Cubs. And he came down to Phoenix and came into our draft room and looked at all the boards. And he's looking at the boards, and he looks over at me about 20 minutes before the draft starts. And he goes, "Tim, have at it." And I'm kind of puzzled by what he meant by it. And he says, "Tim, have at it." And he says, "No player is unsignable." And here we are, we got this board over to the far right of the unsignables. And there was probably 150. And roughly, and all of a sudden when he says this, we're gonna have to move some of these guys over from the 8th board over to the 1st board. And it was kind of, I won't say mayhem, but it was wild optimism, because all of a sudden now some of these guys that you viewed to be unsignable were now possibly chances of guys that you could sign. And it certainly was a fun time. And I'll go, maybe later on we'll talk about, because this might get too lengthy, but
No, go ahead.
talk about. Well, okay, so we have our draft, blah, blah, blah. I go to Chicago in September, and I said to Tom, Tom, I mean, we only had 20 minutes left to go, and this was before the player agreement when we made this decision. But I said, "Could you give me more than 20 minutes this year?" And he says, "Oh, yeah. And I said, "What do you kind of think we could do for a budget the next year?" And we had set the record for the Chicago Cubs. We spent $13 million in 2011. And he kind of says to me, he says, yeah, I've been thinking about the draft, and how's $18 to $20 million for your next budget? And I'm going to say, no, Tom. But he says, and if we have a little trouble signing a guy, we can have a little bit more wiggle room. But then the players union and the owners got together, and they set the standards for how much money you could give each round. And so that never came to fruition, but it was pretty.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I get why they slotted the draft, because now it's not like it was when you guys were owned by the Tribune, where you weren't really given a fair chance to go into the draft and take the best player. I mean, you had to take the best player that would sign for the money that you would offer them, which isn't taking the best player. And then Tom bought the team, and his family, and you're there, and they're figuring out that there's a draft coming, and the budget that the Tribune gave wasn't the budget that was going to take to draft the best players. And if you would have had that system the way that it had always been for a few years, you guys could have taken advantage of it, like teams like the Cardinals and the Yankees and and the Red Sox. The big spenders did. Hey, we're going to go in the draft. We'll draft a guy that we think's a first round pick that no one else thinks is draftable. 4th round, we'll pay him first round money or more, and he'll stick around, and you get better players, right?
Yeah.
Now it's the unintended consequence. Now everybody has a level field, right? Like, so you should be able to sign anyone in the draft because of the way that it's slotted. Everybody should be able to afford the same amount of money in the draft, which is the reasoning behind it. But the unintended consequence to me is that you're not getting the best players anymore in the game in general, because a lot of players would rather go do other things like football, basketball, soccer, than play baseball, because we can't buy them out of those sports anymore. Dave Winfield might be in the NBA. Tony Gwynn may be, he may be in the NBA. He might be a point guard for the Warriors, right? John Smoltz may be playing hockey for the Blackhawks. You just never know, right?
For sure. We had Jeff Shamarza at the time, and he was going to be a end of the first or top of the second round pick in the NFL. And I don't know in today's world and we were lucky because of being the Cubs and Samardzija going to Notre Dame. He had a like for the Cubs, so we were fortunate enough to sign him. But there's many. Tom Glavine, Chris Carpenter, the pitcher, was supposed to have been a first-round hockey pick. I don't know if we're getting those players today, and I think you're right.
Smoltz maybe in golf, right? Tom Glavine in hockey. Whatever. I mean, like, a lot of these guys are great athletes. Gary Hughes, the great Gary Hughes, our friend and one of the all-time legends in scouting, said that he kind of made his way by looking for the best athletes and teaching them how to play baseball. And it makes so much sense. Hey, why was Tom Brady drafted? Because he could play. He was a catcher. He could. They knew that he was a great athlete. He went to Michigan instead. But it takes away a little bit of that as far as the ability to go out and get the best player. But at the same time, I feel like the difference between now and in the past, and this is the other side of the coin when it comes to, you're talking about most of the players that are being drafted out of this country have been playing on travel teams since they were, 7 years old, 8 years old. Then they go to a big college and play, and they've played a ton of competitive baseball. Velocities are up. I feel like that has to do with the fact that the technique is a lot better than it used to be. They're getting instruction from former pros a lot of times, which is something that my generation didn't have. Now they're doing it. So the skill set that some of these guys come in with is definitely advanced compared to where maybe it was in the past.
Exactly, and these players at the ages of 15 to 18 playing travel ball are seemingly more advanced, not only mentally, but kids seem to be growing at more of a rapid pace today. So physically, you're seeing a lot of guys that are advanced, and it's no longer guessing if that frame's going to expand like in the past. You might get a 160-pound player that you project to be 210 pounds. Well, a lot of those kids now are, there's advanced workout regimens and getting stronger, and you see a lot more of that today, that especially with these high school kids, that they almost have that now body. I mean, they're just going to be adding on, once they sign, they're just going to be adding on some strength, and more than likely it's not going to be as much weight advancement as you would have seen 15, 20 years ago. So it's definitely good in that sense, but I think it can be a little exclusive. And unfortunately, some guys and some players that had some interest maybe when they were younger are not as solvent financially to play with these clubs.
Yep, no doubt. Great hanging out with all of you guys. Episode 7 of the MLB Baseball Scout Podcast with Tim Wilken. I'm Mick Gillispie. Please go to YouTube and follow our channel at Cubs Baseball Channel and be a part of it. the Cubs in the draft took Matt Shaw. He was the second baseman for the Maryland Terrapins, a guy that can hit. As a former Maryland Terrapin, I was really excited about it. I thought it was a good pick. Now, I know I graduated from Alabama, but I started at Maryland, so it's pretty cool to see a former Terp as the number one pick. And he can play shortstop. He can pick it a little bit. He's got a lot of power. He's their best player. You take a college shortstop with that pick, you're expecting him to be in the big leagues pretty soon. I mean, I've seen guys that were drafted last year, including the shortstop out of Campbell with the Angels, who's in the big leagues already, Neto. So, I mean, like, this happens. I'm wondering if he's on the fast track with the Cubs.
Most certainly could be. I've not got to see him very much as a player, but Maryland's starting to inject more talent into professional baseball, and you're on the right track there. There's so many middle infielders taken in this draft, and quite a few that from the high school level as well. And it was almost seemed like every other pick they were announcing a shortstop or a middle infielder, and that's kind of exciting. I think. Yeah. You got Zach Neto, and then you got Volpe, and you got a lot of middle infielders that have made quick advancement. Pena with Houston. A lot of these guys have made quick advancements through the minor leagues and been frontline players for their clubs.
Yep, no doubt. All right, Tim, as we near the end of episode 7, it's time for my favorite part of the show, probably your least favorite part of the show, but it's part of the show, and that's Tim's scouting tip. You've been in this a long time. You've taught. You're like the Yoda of scouting. I mean, just teaching, young Jedis how to go out and find first-round talent. Give me a good tip. And I got to tell you, last tip, I've been watching when guys pitch, how they act when they're not on the mound, how they get the ball, how their bodies look. It's like you can pick up a little bit about someone and their athleticism based off of the way that they move when they don't have the ball. So I thought that was a good tip. What do you got for us this week?
Well, this was kind of it came to mind a few days ago, and I just kind of parlayed it in today. But we're back to the word called demographics, and what I would tell some of these young scouts is we're in this game to be inclusive, not exclusive. And the word demographic has some exclusiveness to it. And I think it's kind of an elitist comment. It's all sizes and shapes. Don't give up on players. There's always exceptions to the rule, whether it be physically, mentally. There's something that when you're watching a player, you're in it to find major leaguers. They're not going to all be easy to read, but at the same time, you can't eliminate players because they're 5'6" or 6'7".
Right.
And the thing is that keep these guys on your list. Watch them closer. You may end up liking them even more. So, inclusive, not exclusive.
Give me a comp to this. Jose Altuve, Dustin Pedroia, someone that you remember scouting who maybe didn't fit the analytical profile of, hey, pitcher's got to be 6'4", 200 pounds, got to throw 100 miles an hour, or they don't fit. Just give me a comp that you said, this guy right here doesn't fit what we kind of have as a profile. Which, look, if someone falls into that profile, it's probably going to be easier for that person to make it just based off of, just body genetics and chemistry. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they will.
I think Pedroia is a very good example. And I probably should have even done a better job than I did on his particular draft. But I just think, I mean, you can go to the other side of the scale, and you got Ellie De La Cruz at 6'5". You got O'Neill Cruz, who's 6'7" and playing shortstop. So what I was talking about earlier is that just because there hasn't been that particular player that's played in the major leagues up till this time period, you've got to watch it a little more closely because, both sides of the scale, you got Altuve at 5'6", and a host of others between 5'6" and 5'8", and now all of a sudden you got a 6'5" and a 6'7" shortstop.
Right. Which started with Earl Weaver in Baltimore when he moved 6'4" or 6'5" Cal Ripken Jr. to shortstop from third base, and then the guy just happened to stay there forever. Never left.
Yeah, and there used to be a thing in scouting there for a while where you know, 6'3" was too tall for a catcher. I think 3 or 4 of our guys in this All-Star game are 6'4" and taller, and Jonah Hines. Well, you got Rutschman, who's 6'3", pushing 6'4". You got Jonah Heim, who's could be 6'5", but he's all of 6'4". And there's more and more catchers today that are taller. And I think if their legs aren't particularly too long for their physique, I think they can use those legs better than people think they can, simply because of their height.
No
so
doubt.
They might have a longer upper torso, but at the same time, they're able to use those legs and those feet in which,
All right, Tim. Tim, I think we lost you. There you are. You're back.
Oh, geez.
Well, look, Tim.
Look.
Yeah, you must have slipped. But listen, it's probably a good time to tell everyone thank you for hanging out with us again. Please follow on YouTube at Cubs Baseball Channel, the MLB Baseball Scout Podcast. Show 7 magically is in the books. Can you believe that, Tim? 7 shows in.
7. Going for double figures.
Hey, next time, right? We'll be on number 8. We'll have a complete breakdown of the draft, and we'll talk more MLB Baseball Scouts podcast and everything that we like to drop with it next time on the show. He's Tim Wilken. I'm Mick Gillispie. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Have a great week.